Alex had always known he wasn't a priority in his father's new life. Ever since his dad married Claire and they had their daughter Sophie, things had changed. It wasn't dramatic. There was no outright cruelty, no grand betrayals, just a slow, steady shift, like a tide pulling him further and further away from the family he was supposed to be part of. At first, he told himself it was normal. His dad had a new wife, a new child. Of course, things would be different. He was already 16 when Sophie was born, practically an adult, while she was a baby who needed all their attention. But as years passed, that newborn phase skew stopped making sense. It wasn't just about Sophie needing more care. It was about Claire making sure Alex was always a step outside their little circle, and his dad, either too blind or too passive, letting it happen. Alex had tried to ignore it, brushing off the small slights, the way Claire never included him in family photos she printed for their home, the way she always referred to our family as just her, his dad, and Sophie, the way his dad's presence in his life became more and more like an afterthought. He didn't want to be the bitter, resentful stepchild. He had his own life. After all, college, friends, a part-time job. He wasn't dependent on them. But that didn't mean it didn't hurt. So when his dad mentioned the beach trip, Alex had assumed he was included. It wasn't even a question in his mind. The idea of a family vacation felt like something they hadn't done in years, and despite everything, he wanted that. He wanted to believe his dad still saw him as part of the family. It wasn't until Claire made an offhand comment about finally getting some time with just the three of us that Alex's stomach dropped. "What do you mean, the three of you?" he asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. Claire looked at him like he was being dense. "Me, your dad, and Sophie," she said, as if it was obvious. "It's been so long since we had a real vacation together, and Sophie's old enough to enjoy it now. She's been so excited." Alex's gaze flicked to his dad, waiting for him to correct her. But his father just looked uncomfortable, shifting in his chair like he wanted to be anywhere else. "Wait," Alex said slowly, "I'm not going?" Claire sighed, in that exasperated way she always did when she had to explain something to him that she clearly thought should be obvious. "Alex, you're 19, you have your own life. We thought you'd be busy with work and college, and honestly, we didn't think you'd even be interested in a trip like this. It's more for Sophie. She's been asking for a beach vacation for months." Alex felt his chest tighten. It wasn't even just about the trip itself. It was about what it represented, about how easily they'd just assumed he wouldn't be part of it, about how it had never even crossed their minds to ask him. His dad finally spoke up. "We didn't do it to leave you out, bud. We just thought, well, you know, you're older now. We figured you might not want to go on a little kid vacation." Alex clenched his jaw. There it was again, the subtle but constant reminder that he didn't fit in, that their family wasn't something he was really part of anymore. "You should have at least told me," he said, his voice tight, "instead of just letting me find out like this." His dad had the decency to look guilty, but Claire just shook her head. "Alex, don't make this into a big deal. It's just a trip. You have the house to yourself for a few days. Most kids your age would love that." "Most kids your age?" "Not most sons, not most family members." Alex didn't say anything else. There was no point. The next few days passed in a blur of forced normalcy. His dad tried to act like everything was fine, throwing out half-hearted offers to do something together before the trip, but it was obvious he just wanted to smooth things over, not actually address them. Claire, for her part, avoided the topic altogether. Sophie, blissfully unaware of the tension, excitedly talked about the beach, the hotel, the pool, every detail of the trip that Alex wasn't invited to. And then, just like that, they were gone. Alex stood at the front door, watching as they packed up the car. Sophie was bouncing excitedly in her car seat, Claire was double-checking their bags, and his dad gave him a brief, awkward, "See you in a few days, bud?" He didn't wait to watch them drive off. He just turned back inside, shutting the door behind him. The silence of the empty house pressed in on him. They hadn't even thought twice about leaving him behind. Alex sat down on the couch, staring at the blank television screen, his mind spinning. He told himself he shouldn't care this much. He was an adult. He didn't need to be included in a family trip. But that was the thing, wasn't it? It was family. At least he was supposed to be. And yet they had left like he didn't even exist. Alex spent the first few hours after they left trying to convince himself that it didn't matter. He did what any 19-year-old would do when given an empty house. He ordered takeout, put on a movie, scrolled through his phone. But no matter what he did, the silence pressed in on him. It wasn't just about being alone. It was about being left alone, forgotten, like he didn't matter. He told himself it was fine, but the frustration built with every passing minute. His dad and Claire hadn't even thought twice about excluding him. They hadn't considered how it might feel. Instead, they just packed up and left, perfectly content with their new little family unit. And the worst part, they weren't even hiding it. Claire had already started posting pictures on social media. The first one popped up that evening, a shot of the ocean view from their hotel room, captioned, "Finally getting some much-needed family time." Alex felt his stomach twist. Family time, right. Because apparently he didn't count as family. He scrolled down, trying to ignore it, but more posts followed. A picture of Sophie by the pool, grinning in a brightly colored swimsuit. Another of his dad and Claire holding drinks, smiling for the camera. Every image was another reminder that they were happy without him, that they hadn't even considered how he might feel seeing this. The final straw came the next morning. Alex woke up, checked his phone out of habit, and saw a new post from Claire. "Sophie's first time at the beach. So happy we could make this trip happen for her." And in the comments, one of Claire's friends had written, "Such a beautiful family." Claire had responded with a heart emoji. No correction. No, "Oh, Alex couldn't make it this time." Just silent agreement. That was when Alex made his decision. He wasn't going to sit here, scrolling through their perfect little vacation, feeling sorry for himself. He was going to remind them that he existed. It wasn't about revenge, not exactly. He didn't want to ruin their trip. He just wanted them to see him, to acknowledge what they had done, to feel even a fraction of what he was feeling now. So he started planning. First, he figured out where they were staying. It wasn't difficult. Claire had tagged the resort in one of her photos. A quick search showed that it was about a 4-hour drive away, a fancy beachfront place with multiple pools, spa services, and private beach access. Expensive, definitely not the kind of place his dad would have taken him when he was younger. Then he checked his bank account. He didn't have much, just some savings from his part-time job and leftover birthday money, but it was enough for a couple of nights at a cheap motel nearby. He wasn't planning to stay long, just long enough to make an impression. He packed a small bag, just enough clothes for a couple of days, and grabbed his car keys. Before he could second-guess himself, he was on the road. The drive gave him too much time to think. He went over everything in his head, the way things had changed over the years, the way his dad had let Claire push him further and further away. Maybe if his dad had actually talked to him, actually tried to keep him involved, things wouldn't have gotten to this point. By the time he pulled into the small parking lot of his motel, he was more determined than ever. The motel itself was nothing special, a far cry from the luxury resort his family was staying at. But it was cheap, and it was close enough to the resort that he could get there easily. That afternoon, he put his plan into action. He started small. He knew Claire was the type to post everything in real time, so he used that to his advantage. When she posted a photo of Sophie playing in the sand, Alex headed to the beach, staying just far enough away that they wouldn't immediately notice him. He walked along the shore, casually passing by, his heart pounding the entire time. He didn't make direct eye contact, didn't do anything obvious. He just existed in their space, the way he should have from the start. At first, it didn't seem like they noticed, but then, as he walked past their spot on the beach, he saw Claire glance up. Her sunglasses covered her eyes, but he could tell she had seen him. He kept walking, not stopping, not acknowledging them, just letting the moment linger, letting them wonder if they had really seen what they thought they had. That night, he went to a restaurant near the resort. He made sure to pick one that was popular, somewhere they were likely to go, and sure enough, halfway through his meal, he spotted them at a table across the patio. Claire saw him first. He caught the moment her expression shifted. the way her body tensed. She leaned over, whispering something to his dad, and his dad turned, his eyes widening slightly when he saw Alex sitting there, casually eating his dinner like it was just a coincidence. For a moment, no one moved. Then, Alex lifted his glass slightly in acknowledgement. Not a wave, not an invitation to talk, just enough to show that he saw them. And then he went back to eating. He could feel Claire's stare on him the entire time. The next morning, he found them by the pool. He didn't approach, didn't do anything obvious. He just lounged in a chair nearby, reading on his phone, acting as if he had every right to be there. It's 'cause he did. He was their family too, whether they liked it or not. By midday, Claire looked like she was on edge, constantly glancing around, like she was trying to figure out if this was some kind of joke. His dad seemed more confused than anything, unsure whether to be concerned or relieved. The real confrontation was coming, and Alex was ready for it. By the third day, Alex knew Claire was unraveling. It was in the way she kept glancing over her shoulder, her normally relaxed vacation demeanor replaced with stiff, forced smiles. She hadn't confronted him yet, but the tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. His dad was harder to read, mostly confused, sometimes looking like he wanted to come over and talk, but never quite mustering the nerve. Her 3 daughters worked like hell to train her, and Alex had kept his presence subtle but persistent. He wasn't stalking them, wasn't disrupting their plans. He was just there, walking past them on the beach, sitting a few tables away at dinner, lounging by the pool at the same time they were. Every time, he could feel their unease growing. It wasn't about making them uncomfortable, not exactly. It was about making them see him, about forcing them to acknowledge what they had done. By the time evening rolled around, he knew it was only a matter of time before someone snapped. He didn't have to wait long. Alex had chosen a quiet restaurant near the resort for dinner, nothing fancy, just a local seafood place with an outdoor patio overlooking the water. He'd been halfway through his meal when he felt the familiar prickle on the back of his neck, the unmistakable sense of being watched. He looked up just in time to see Claire marching toward him. His dad was trailing behind her, clearly hesitant, but Claire was on a mission. Her expression was a mix of frustration and disbelief, like she couldn't quite believe she was dealing with this. Alex leaned back in his chair, keeping his expression neutral. He had expected this. "Alex," Claire said, her voice tight, strained with forced politeness. "What are you doing here?" He set down his fork, wiping his hands with a napkin before meeting her gaze. "Eating dinner," he said, simply. Claire exhaled sharply, crossing her arms. "Don't play games with me, you know what I mean." His dad finally spoke up, his tone softer, more cautious. "Bud, did you come here by yourself?" Alex gave a small shrug. "Yeah." His dad frowned. "You drove all this way? Just for what?" Alex let the question hang in the air for a moment, watching as his father struggled to piece things together. Then he said, "I saw Claire's posts. Figured I'd take my own little vacation." Claire let out a sharp laugh, but there was no humor in it. "Oh, come on. Don't pretend this is some coincidence." She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "Are you following us?" Alex raised an eyebrow. "Following you? No, I'm just enjoying the same public spaces as you. Didn't realize that was a crime." Her jaw clenched, and he could see the irritation flaring in her eyes. "This isn't normal, Alex. You don't just show up like this. It's weird." "Weird?" he repeated, tilting his head slightly. "You mean like leaving a family member behind and acting like they don't exist?" Claire stiffened, and his dad shifted uncomfortably beside her. "That's not what we did," his father said, but there was guilt in his voice. "No?" Alex asked, keeping his tone casual. "Because from where I'm sitting, it sure felt like that. You planned a vacation, called it family time, didn't even think to invite me, and then posted about it like I wasn't even a part of your life." His dad ran a hand through his hair, sighing. "Alex, it wasn't like that. We just thought—" "You thought I wouldn't care," Alex interrupted. "You thought I was old enough to not need to be included, but you never even asked, Dad. You never even considered me." A flicker of something passed over his father's face. Regret, maybe. Claire, on the other hand, looked ready to explode. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "You're acting like we abandoned you on the side of the road. You're 19. Adults don't throw tantrums over not getting a beach trip." Alex let out a short laugh, shaking his head. "See, that's the thing, Claire. You keep saying I'm an adult when it's convenient for you, but if I were really part of this family, you wouldn't have treated me like some outsider who doesn't belong. You wouldn't have assumed I wouldn't want to go, and you sure as hell wouldn't be acting like I'm the crazy one for reminding you that I exist." Claire's lips pressed into a thin line, and for a moment, she didn't have a response. His dad cleared his throat, his voice quieter this time. "Alex, I'm sorry." Alex looked at him, waiting for more. His dad sighed. "I wasn't thinking. I should have talked to you first. I should have asked if you wanted to come." He hesitated, then added, "That was wrong." Alex didn't let the relief show on his face, but he felt it, just a little. His dad had finally admitted it. Claire, on the other hand, still wasn't backing down. "This is ridiculous," she muttered. "So what, are you expecting us to just invite you to everything now? Rearrange our plans to make sure you feel included?" Alex met her gaze head on. "No, Claire. I'm expecting you to remember that I'm part of this family, whether you like it or not." Her mouth opened like she wanted to argue, but his dad placed a hand on her arm, stopping her. "Let's just go back to the hotel," his dad said, his tone weary. "We'll talk later." Claire let out a frustrated sigh but didn't push it further. His dad turned back to Alex. "Are you staying in town?" "Oh, for a couple more days," Alex said. His dad nodded, something unreadable in his expression. "Maybe we can, I don't know, get lunch or something before you leave?" Alex studied him for a moment. There was hesitation there, but also something else, an effort. It wasn't everything, but it was something. "Yeah," Alex said finally. "Maybe." His dad gave him a small nod before turning to leave. Claire shot him one last exasperated look before following. As they walked away, Alex exhaled, feeling a weight he hadn't even realized he was carrying start to shift. This wasn't over. But for the first time in a long time, it felt like maybe, just maybe, his dad was starting to hear him. The night after the confrontation, Alex lay in his motel bed, staring at the ceiling. He had expected to feel satisfied, maybe even vindicated, after finally calling out his dad and Claire, but instead, there was just a hollow kind of exhaustion. He had made his point. They had seen him, acknowledged him. His dad had even apologized, at least partially. But was that really enough? Alex didn't know. The next morning, he debated leaving town early. He had already done what he came to do. What was the point in sticking around? But then he remembered what his dad had said. "Maybe we can get lunch or something before you leave." It hadn't been a promise, more like an offering, tentative and uncertain, and Alex had learned the hard way that his dad was good at saying things he didn't follow through on. But still, it was something. So he waited. Mid-morning, his phone buzzed. It was a text from his dad. "Hey, bud, want to grab lunch today? Just you and me?" Alex hesitated before typing back. "Yeah, where?" His dad sent the name of a quiet cafe near the resort, and an hour later, Alex found himself sitting across from him at an outdoor table, the ocean stretching out in the distance. For a while, neither of them said much. His dad looked tired, like he hadn't slept well. He stirred his coffee absent-mindedly, then finally exhaled. "I messed up, didn't I?" he said, his voice quieter than usual. Alex wasn't expecting him to come out and say it so bluntly. "Yeah," he said, "you did." His dad nodded slowly. "I guess I thought, I don't know, that you wouldn't care as much." He gave a small, self-deprecating laugh. "That sounds awful, huh?" "Huh?" Alex didn't answer right away. He wasn't sure what to say. His dad sighed. "It's not like I don't care about you, Alex. You know that, right?" "Do I?" Alex asked. It wasn't meant to be cruel, just honest. "Because it doesn't feel like that sometimes?" His dad winced, rubbing a hand over his face. "I don't know how it got like this," he admitted. "I mean, I do, I guess. Claire, Sophie, everything changing. But I never meant to push you out." But you did, Alex said, and not just with this trip. His dad nodded slowly. Yeah. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Alex took a sip of his water. He had spent so much time being angry about this, about being left out, about being treated like an afterthought. But what did he actually want now? He wanted his dad to care. Not out of guilt, not out of obligation, just actually care. His dad let out another long breath. Claire isn't happy, he admitted. She thinks what you did was, I don't know, dramatic. Over the top. Alex let out a short laugh. Yeah, that sounds like her. His dad looked at him, hesitating. She's not a bad person, Alex. I never said she was, Alex said. But she doesn't want me in this family, not really. His dad flinched. That's not true. Alex just raised an eyebrow, waiting. His dad looked away, staring out at the water. He didn't argue. Alex sighed. Look, I don't need her to like me. I don't even need her to treat me like a son. But I do need you to act like I still matter to you, because if you keep letting her push me out, one day I'm going to stop trying. And then I won't be part of your life at all. His dad's expression shifted. Regret, sadness, maybe even a little fear. I don't want that, he said quietly. Then you need to do something about it, Alex said simply. His dad nodded, looking down at his coffee. I will. Alex wasn't sure if he believed him yet. But it was the first time his dad had really acknowledged what was happening. They finished their meal, and as they got up to leave, his dad hesitated. Then, a little awkwardly, he pulled Alex into a brief hug. I'll do better, he murmured. Alex stood still for a moment, then nodded against his dad's shoulder. I hope so. His dad pulled away, looking a little emotional but determined. I'll call you when we get back home, and not just to check in. Maybe we can go grab dinner or something. Just us. Alex nodded. I'd like that. It wasn't a perfect ending. Claire still wouldn't change. Sophie would always be his dad's priority, and things wouldn't magically go back to the way they were when Alex was younger. But for the first time in a long time, his dad had made a choice. And this time, he had chosen Alex.